Have you ever looked at your student loans, your mortgage, or your paycheck and thought, there's no way I'm going to build real wealth on this salary? Maybe you feel behind, maybe you started investing late, and maybe you're making six figures, but somehow you still feel like you're not getting ahead. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most clinicians don't fail to build wealth because they're not making enough money. They fail because they don't understand the power of compound interest in their investment accounts.
And the crazy part, the math to become a millionaire is way more doable than people actually think.
Which is super encouraging. And so today we're going to break down how a PT in the lowest paying state can still become a millionaire, why over 80% of your retirement account won't even be money that you put in if you start early enough, how to choose between Roth and traditional, how 401ks, IRAs, and vesting actually works, and how to structure your paycheck using the Fiscal Clinician SOAP Strategy. But first, let's break down the power of compound interest and investing early, using the lowest paid PTs in the United States. And at this time, what the data says is Montana has a median salary of $85,550, and this is one of the lowest in the United States. So, Devon, why don't you talk to us about the power of compound interest?
Yeah, so we're going to take Mr. Montana Millionaire, the PT that moved to Montana, and we're going to take, for example, that he's starting at the age of 30. He wants to retire at 65 years old. And with an earning of 10% average return over those years, if you invested $318 per month, you will become a millionaire. Now let's pause there. That's $318 per month, not $3,000, not $1,000. And if you want to break down the math, at $318 for 12 months is a total of $3,816 per year.
Yeah, and if we look from an income ratio standpoint, that's only about 4.5% of that income, that $85,000 salary. If you're working in Montana, if you're looking at the national median salary of a physical therapist, that number is closer to $101,000. And so that's only 3.8% of your income. It's less than 5%, guys. And so if we can just start at 30, invest 5% of our income, then you could be a millionaire. If you do more, you can become a multimillionaire. And so let's talk about the contributions versus the compound growth numbers. If you started investing 20 years ago, then only 35% of your money is what's going to be your contribution, so what you put in. The other 65% is all compound growth. If we look at 30 years, only 19% of what's going to be in the account when you retire is what you contributed. The other 81% is all compound growth.
The big takeaway here, most of your money isn't coming from you working harder. It's actually coming from the time working for you. And a well-known investment analyst, Warren Buffett, often said, if you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. So the biggest takeaway here is invest early, take advantage of the compound growth.
So if you're listening to this and thinking, okay, how do I actually set up these accounts, these IRAs? We're going to get into that. But it's also exactly how we help clinicians and healthcare professionals as financial coaches. We walk through budgeting or opening up and starting a 401k, starting an IRA, how much to contribute based on your budget and your financial situations. These are the numbers we love helping people with. And so if you want help building your own personal plan, you can schedule a financial strategy session with us at fiscalclinician.com. We also have free 15-minute consults so you can decide if coaching might be the best fit for you. It's at fiscalclinician.com. It's also in the link in the description. And so let's now break down how PT salaries actually look across the country in the United States. According to the latest Bureau of Labor Statistics data, we said before the national median salary for physical therapists is about $101,000 per year, or roughly $48 per hour. And most physical therapists fall somewhere in the high 90s to low 100,000s, depending on setting and experience. Obviously, this is the median of when people are just starting their careers and seasoned clinicians. And so we're looking right in the middle.
And if you look at the higher paying states like California, Nevada, Alaska, and New Jersey, these guys are typically earning $110,000 or more on average. But even in lower paying states like Montana and Kentucky, PTs are still generally earning in the mid to upper 80s.
Yeah, so we're not talking about a $60,000 profession here, guys. We're talking about a potential and often likely six-figure career, which means being a multimillionaire is absolutely possible if you structure your finances right and if you're intentional with your money.
And so if you're living in a lower cost state, but earning near the national median, that margin of cash between your paycheck and cost of living expenses becomes big investment power. And that's where you widen the gap, dump this extra cash into your retirement accounts, such as your 401k, your Roth, or separate retirement accounts. And in episode 9, we did a deep dive on geographical considerations for your healthcare job. So if you want more detail on that and how to take advantage of these strategies, check out our episode 9.
Obviously, you don't just want to spring for the highest paying job because you might be paying twice the amount in cost of living. And so you have to look at the whole picture, right? And the other thing you want to consider, and you can look at our budgeting episode for this, but we say 5% to start if you're still paying off debt. If you're no longer paying off debt, we think you should be at least 10%, if not 15% or more of your income going towards these retirement accounts. And that's going to set you up to be a multimillionaire and retire comfortably. So at Fiscal Clinician, I came up with what I like to call the SOAP strategy of investing. Now, everyone in healthcare writes a SOAP note. They're familiar with their subjective, objective, assessment, and plan of care. And so I wanted to use a word that was well known throughout healthcare. And I use this acronym SOAP to help you figure out how do you invest and become a millionaire investing. And so everything fits inside this model. Now, the S of this mnemonic stands for systematic. What does this mean? It means we want you to automate your savings monthly. Whether it's automatically coming out of your paycheck, whether it's automatically coming out of your checking account, make sure to automate your investments every month so you don't ever miss a month. The O stands for objective, but objective here means to invest based on data and index fund history, not emotion or hype. There will be so many different moments in time where something is super hyped up. Everyone gets emotional about it. Oh, you have to invest in crypto. You'll be a millionaire. You have to invest in AI now. It's going to blow up. There's always going to be a new thing. Avoiding the temptation to put all your money in these and then investing in things that are very diverse and have performed over a long period of time. Because you can look at these funds and see sometimes 30 to 50 years of these funds performing at 10 to 12%. And so that gives you a great idea of what it's going to do in the future. Now, A stands for allocated. And this just means we want you to have a diverse mix of assets. For example, if you invest in these index funds we're talking about, for example, an S&P 500 index fund, your money is spread across 500 of the largest companies in the United States. And so that's already a great diversification strategy. And then most people will take it a step further. Maybe they'll add some small cap type of funds or even international type of funds. If what I'm saying doesn't make a whole lot of sense, this is a great time to start researching what are these, what do they mean? And we'll talk a little bit more about a couple ways to start your research. The last letter, P, stands for passive. This means low cost and low maintenance growth. And again, these index funds are very low cost. You don't have to pay much. Unlike actively managed funds and investing, they're usually a lot more expensive because more trades happen. And these index funds, they're truly passive in that you save your money, you put it in these funds, and you don't do anything. You just wait, you let them grow, don't pull the money out, even when everyone's freaking out that there's a market downturn, because it's going to continue to grow. Unlike, if you look at real estate, people talk about passive income in real estate, and it's just not passive. Like, you're doing so much to manage a household, take care of a house, deal with crazy tenants. I know Devon can talk some on just the craziness of real estate.
Yeah, I like to think that with real estate also, it's interesting that, the goal is to actually earn 10%, right? The 10% return in your real estate, if you're cash flowing off a property, it's usually 10%. And just like Josh said, it's not passive. I've done it for years, renting my couch on Airbnb. I've rented out a room. I've rented out my entire condo before in the past. And ultimately, you still got to find cleaners. You still have to be a manager or find a manager. And that's just going to cut into your investment and your time, put it to sleep. You let it grow for itself. You can totally relax at night and not think about a tenant clogging up your toilet or starting a house fire. Things do happen, right? So,
Yep.
and so we really like this SOAP strategy. And if your investing requires daily stress, like you're just watching CNBC or Mad Money, and you're just guessing on these crypto cycles of how they're going up and down, this is not systematic. This is not objective. It's not allocated with control, and it's definitely not passive. And again, Warren Buffett has always said, be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. And if you are just pouring this money in passively, well, these funds are going to purchase this for you, whether it's up or whether it's down.
Yeah, I love that quote. If you're fearful when others are greedy, everybody's seeing these huge dollar signs and the next big thing, and you're like, you know what? I'm just going to keep investing. I'm going to keep doing my thing. And greedy when others are fearful, and news channels drive me crazy, but they're just instilled and they get paid with fear. And so if they can drive more fear into you and scare the crap out of you, it's going to get more views, because you're going to have times, if you're investing over the long haul, where your portfolio goes down 20, 30, maybe even more percent. But again, this is short term. We're talking about 6 months, a year. But if you zoom out and then look at your investments from a decade, 2 decade standpoints, you're going to see that upward trend just like we do in history. If you follow this SOAP strategy, keep investing while the world is freaking out, you will become a millionaire or even a multimillionaire if you give it enough time. And so, Devon, let's transition. I think one topic that brings a lot of people significant confusion is 401ks and IRAs. What are they? How do they work? And so, Devon, why don't we break that down? What's going on specifically with the 401k?
I like to think of it as there are two separate ways of investing, and one is through the employer, the person that you're hired from. And so with the 401k, these are what we call employee-sponsored programs. These are accounts that allow the employer to match what you are actually investing and pouring into that account. Most employers will do a 3 to 5% match. And so, for example, we're going to take $4,000 as your monthly paycheck. So 5% of that monthly paycheck is $200. Now, let's say they do a 100% match at that 5% of your paycheck. This means that they will literally give you $200 to put into this account. They will match it 100%. So at the end of the month, you're not actually just investing $200, you're investing $400 per month.
And just to clarify, with the 401k, we said it's that employee sponsored plan. Often you will have a match, but you won't always have one. It's pretty common for most major companies to have some kind of a match, but you may or may not have that match. And so, of course, if you do have it, absolutely take advantage of that. And so the vesting periods, though, can be a very confusing topic for a lot of people, because you talk about a match and you think, oh yeah, I have all this money, but it takes time to be what we call 100% vested in a company. So the employer match is not fully yours until you are fully vested in the company. Before then, you get percentages of it. But whatever you contribute, so like if you invested $200 of your own money, that will always 100% be yours. It's just the employer match that takes time. And so there's two main ways that vesting occurs. The first one is called cliff vesting. This is an all or nothing vesting schedule. It's a little more simple to understand. The way it works most often is if you've worked at the company for 3 years or more, you are 100% vested in that match. So if they matched at 5%, if you leave the company after 3 years, you will get 100% of that match. If you left the company at 2 years and 11 months, you would get nothing from the match. And so with this version, if this is how your HR department works, it would definitely be worth staying on an extra month or two, even if you're kind of miserable, just because you can then get all this extra money the company was going to pay you anyway. Now, let's talk about the second example. This is the more common one. It's called graded vesting. Depending on the number of years that you're in the company, that will depend on what percentage of the match you get. Usually, if you've been at a company for 1 year, you don't get any of the vesting match for either example, actually. It's year 2 that you start to get some of the vesting periods started. And so if you've been at a company for 2 years, then usually you start to get 20% of the match. So for example, if you worked somewhere 2 years and then left, then if you had $1,000 matched, you would only get 200 of that $1,000. Because again, the 20% of 1,000, you've stayed there for 2 years. If you're there for 3 years or more, usually it's 40%. So if we have that same $1,000, you get 400 of the $1,000. And then for years 4, 5, 6, usually it's 60, 80, and 100%. Again, look at your specific company. Sometimes the years are slightly different, but usually at 6 years, you are fully vested. I had a client recently. I was going through his finances. Hey, how much do we have in investments and retirement? And when you first look, it looks like you have all this money, but really you have only a percentage of that money.
I think that's super important to consider when you are looking at contracts. A lot of contracts in Hawaii, they're usually a 2-year contract because they do need you to stay for a couple of years. And Hawaii is also very transitional. And so they're looking to secure you for 2 years. So one big thing to consider is if you do have a 2-year contract in place and you're looking to stay for 3 to 5 years, you need to re-look at the amount vested over those years and when you actually do have 100% vested into the company. And I'd like to think of the 401k as your payment for being loyal to this company. Most financial websites will tell you if you are vested and if so, how much. So you can also make a decision on if you are planning to leave, maybe it's beneficial to stay maybe another 6 months or another year in order to get that money for being so loyal to the company.
Yeah. And the websites are kind of dumb, but the way they set it up, at least this is my experience so far, is they'll show you the full balance, including what's not vested, which kind of drives you nuts because it looks like, oh my gosh, I have $30,000. And then you look back and you're like, oh, it's actually $20,000 and 10,000 of it isn't vested or something like that, right? That's a bit of an aggressive example. So make sure when you're looking at your 401k, there's like a toggle switch where you can change it to vested balance. And that's actually what you have in the account. And so yeah, let's transition to Roth versus traditional. Now, again, not every company has this, but inside a 401k, you usually have options of a Roth 401k and a traditional 401k. This didn't used to be the case, but more and more companies have kind of bought into the Roth option as well. And so let's talk about what Roth means. And this will be in the context of a 401k and an IRA. So Roth, what you'll hear it said or explained as is it's tax exempt. And what does this mean? For a Roth, 401k, or IRA, you are paying taxes before you invest the money. So you already paid state and federal taxes, and then the money gets invested. And you might ask, what's the advantage to this, right? It grows tax-free. This is really huge, especially if you're a young clinician. Usually the power of compound interest is going to grow all that money tax-free, and then you don't have to pay taxes in retirement when you take the money out. Another big advantage is with a Roth, there are no required minimum distributions, or they'll call them RMDs sometimes. And you might wonder, what the heck is that? I thought the same thing. Basically, once you turn 73 to 75, and it depends on what year you were born, the government on a traditional account forces you to take some of the money out of your retirement account, depending on how much money you have. With a Roth account, you don't have to do this. There's no RMDs are required minimum distributions. And so you don't have to take out any money. You could leave it all. You could withdraw some of it, but that's another cool advantage of the Roth. So Devon, tell us about the traditional 401k or IRA. How does that work?
Yeah. So for a traditional account, think of it as, the money you put in isn't taxed right away. It goes straight into the retirement account. So this could potentially lower the income that actually gets taxed from your paycheck today. However, you'll pay taxes later when you withdraw in retirement. So we're just going to take a quick example for clarity here. Let's say you earn $2,000 per paycheck and you put $500 into your traditional account. Instead of paying taxes on the full $2,000, you're going to actually only pay taxes on the $1,500. So just like Josh said, with traditional accounts, there is a required minimum distribution age of 73 to 75 years old. So once you hit that age, you're going to be required to distribute some of it back to you, but you will also be paying taxes on that distribution in a traditional account. So again, no taxes up front, but you're taxed when you're withdrawing, when you're bringing the money out the door. And the huge advantage to a traditional account is this account can actually help you lower your taxable income for the year. This becomes a little more nitty gritty in terms of accounting investment strategies. And it may be something that you need to consult with a CPA or your tax accountant for if you do want to play this game a little bit.
Great points, Devon. And yeah, it can be confusing even with the terminology, but just remember Roth is tax exempt because you've already paid taxes on it, but you're not paying taxes on the growth and you're not paying taxes when you take the money out. The reason a traditional account is called tax deferred is because you defer the taxes. You wait to pay the taxes until later when you pull it out. And again, it can be an amazing strategy depending on your income level. And we'll talk later about when does it make sense to do what. So let's talk about contribution limits. In other words, how much can you put into each account? And so as of 2026, if you're under the age of 50 years old, you can contribute $24,500 to your 401k. And then for an IRA, an individual retirement account, you can contribute up to $7,500 right now, which comes out to $625 per month. And remember, these are separate accounts. People often think, oh, well, I'm contributing to this, so I can't do that. You could contribute a full $24,500 to your 401k. And additionally, you could contribute another $7,500 each year to your IRA. You and your spouse have access to both of these. So if you're working with a player two, if you will, you could individually contribute $7,500 to an IRA and individually, if you're both working, contribute to a 401k. Let's say your spouse doesn't work. It doesn't matter for an IRA. And so if I had a wife who is a stay-at-home mom, for example, she could still contribute to that IRA. Now, she's not working, so she won't have access to a 401k, but it's cool because at least you have another avenue for your spouse to invest, even if they don't have an earned income.
Yeah. And if you're thinking, should I do a Roth or a traditional account? I really don't know. We default more towards the Roth account because we do want this money to grow tax-free. If you put $1 million into that Roth account over the years as a clinician, there's going to be $1 million of tax-free money there. There's no required minimum distributions, and you can pass this account down to your kids. The kids won't pay any taxes on this money if you pass it down. So we think there's a huge tax advantage here. However, there are reasons that a traditional IRA makes sense.
Yeah, well, and going back to like if you're passing down to your kids, either way, you could pass a traditional or a Roth IRA to your kids. But one of them, your kids get this gift and they're like, oh my gosh, $1 million. And then they're like, oh crap, I have to pay taxes on this, which is kind of a bummer. But with a Roth, they get $1 million and that's it. So that's pretty nice, especially if you're thinking about generational wealth and that's your strategy, then even if it's lowering your taxable income with a traditional account, it might make more sense to do the Roth still. But again, there are reasons to do a traditional account. Let's say you're right up against a different tax bracket, and we're talking about federal tax brackets here. Let's say you were making $210,000 and you contributed $10,000 to a traditional account. Well, then right now you're only taxed at $200,000 instead of $210,000. And so especially for high income earners, if we're talking to any physicians, for example, this might be a better strategy of mixing, hey, we're doing some Roth and some traditional or more heavily on traditional. If that's your situation, definitely a good thing to talk to a tax professional. It gets more complicated. But for rehab professionals, if you're making like $200,000 as an individual or less, then oftentimes Roth is going to be the best option, especially if you're a young clinician. And here's some things to consider if you're trying to choose between Roth and traditional. Now, if your tax rate is higher now than it will be later, traditional could be the better option. What do I mean by this? So if you're making, for example, more money now than you will later, traditional could be better because if you plan to start working part-time in your retirement age, then if you're cashing out some of this traditional money, you're actually paying a lower tax rate on it. And so that could be a great advantage if, you say you're going to continue to work a little bit part-time into retirement age. if you cash out your traditional account, if you're working part-time and you only made $20,000, but then you took out $70,000 from a traditional either IRA or 401k, you're going to be paying taxes on that whole $90,000 amount because, again, you taking out of that traditional IRA or 401k is considered a taxable event. Now, if you think your tax rate is the lowest now and lower than it will ever be, then Roth more likely may make sense. For example, let's say you plan to work full-time well into retirement, and your tax rate will likely be higher later on than it is now. And why would it be higher? Well, hopefully you're making more money into your retirement age than you were starting out in your career. And so again, then you're going to pay less taxes now than you would later, and that might be a reason for you to do the Roth instead of the traditional. By default, if you're like, I have no idea what to do, you're making less than $200,000 as an individual, it's probably a good idea to just contribute to Roth. It's kind of just a simplicity thing for me too. Like what you see is what you get with a Roth. And so, you have $1 million in retirement and you're like, cool, we have $1 million. If you did $1 million in traditional, then you're kind of like, okay, well, we got $1 million. We're going to be taxed at this tax bracket. So if you take this much out, it's just a lot less mental math and work. And so I'm kind of like, if you have a really good reason to do traditional, I think there's a lot of advantages to, especially high income earners. Otherwise, for, PTs, OTs, nurses, etc., a lot of times you're going to be at a tax bracket where it makes sense to do a Roth.
Josh and I like to break it down into 3 easy steps to start your investment foundation. And so if the employer matches in your 401k, this is step 1. Do that first. So if they match 5%, you focus on contributing this 5% first. And once you've done this, you can move into step 2. And step 2 is where we start contributing to an individual retirement account that is outside our 401k program. And this is because ultimately it allows more flexibility. There are just basically more options to put your money in different places in an individual retirement account. And just remember that it's $7,500 max towards this account compared to the $25,000 that you can contribute each year in your 401k.
I love the comparison, Devon, and the steps just make it easy. Step 1, start contributing up to your match for your 401k. Then I love the point Devon made of like $7,500 as a goal to work towards, hey, I want to max out my IRA. Let's start by working towards contributing $625 a month. That would max out your IRA. However, $25,000 is a lot loftier of a goal, right? So it's nice to start with these small little steps. And in terms of an IRA, there's a really important beginner mistake to avoid. A lot of people open up an IRA and start putting money in the IRA thinking, hey, I'm going to be making 8 to 12%, whatever it may be, but they never invest the money. The important distinction here is if you just put money in an IRA, it's a glorified savings account. Okay, it doesn't actually self-invest into funds. And so you have to tell the money where to go. Remember that a Roth IRA or a 401k, those are just the containers, but that doesn't mean you're invested in a specific fund. That's where a SOAP strategy comes in. And as financial coaches, we can't tell you where to invest your money, but we can at least give you a couple examples of where you can start to do your research. So for example, some great index funds that have very low overall fees that you could look at. The first one is Vanguard's VOO, and that's essentially just an S&P 500 index fund. The reason we picked the 2 that we're telling you about is because they don't have minimum investments. So you could start with something as small as $25 or $50 a month. And as you get more confident, you start to automate more money into there. The other good example is Vanguard's VTI, which is a total stock market index fund. Basically what this is, think of about 80% of it as an S&P 500, so those largest 500 companies in the United States, and the other portion of it is basically small caps. And you can think of small caps as basically smaller companies, mom and pop shops, that type of thing, instead of these huge, Fortune 500 companies. If none of this is making sense, just do some research. Figure out what an S&P 500 fund is. Figure out what a small cap fund is. And that's a great place to start on self-educating as well. We covered step 1 and 2. Step 1's to meet the match at whatever percentage it is. Step 2 is to start working towards maxing out your individual retirement account. And step 3, if you've done all this, which is amazing, then we want you to start working on maxing out your 401k. We often recommend starting by maxing out all your tax advantaged accounts. And by tax advantaged, we mean the 401k and the IRA. And then you can move on to taxable brokerage accounts later, because you're just going to get more bang for your buck and have more money in retirement if you invest most of your money in that rather than a taxable account.
And as coaches, we'll never tell you what to buy, but these are great places to start doing your research, start educating yourself. Because if you've accomplished the first 3 steps, and if you're looking for more advanced investment strategies, one that I would like to point out is what's called a self-directed Roth account. And so the difference with the self-directed account is it's still a retirement account requiring a specialized custodian that grants you full control of this money to invest in alternative assets beyond traditional stocks and bonds. And so what I did was I compiled all of these 401k accounts into a self-directed account. So I basically took the distributions, I put them all together and contributed them all into one account. And now this account is self-directed, meaning I have the choice of, I can actually buy a business in this account. I can buy real estate in this account that will produce rental income in a retirement account. I can also buy crypto or high growth stocks, and even dividend stocks like Coca-Cola or Realty Income, for example. And so again, this is very advanced. If you do have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Josh or I about this.
Yeah, this is the super nerd level, right? So honestly, you will and can become a millionaire off of those first 3 steps. But yeah, that's some great extra information, Devon. Thanks for sharing that. Well, guys, a reminder, you don't need a $200,000 salary. You don't need crypto luck of hitting the market exactly when you need to. You don't need stock picking skills or day trading skills. What you do need is time, consistency, automation, and low cost index investing. Remember, follow the SOAP method. We're being systematic, objective, allocated, and passive with our index fund investings. And those strategies will take you to millionaire status if you're consistent.
Always remember, start early. It's not about timing the market. It's all about time in the market. And we really just want to let that compound interest do all the heavy lifting for us for the next 30 years of our career.
That's how your healthcare paycheck becomes financial freedom. And so thanks for joining us on the Fiscal Clinician Podcast today. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.